keeping us. Yes, thank you, Mitch. So yes, this is the monthly meeting of the Town of Orono Finance and Operations Committee. Is that what it is? Finance and Operations? Yeah. So we have myself, Jacob, Sarah Marks, Town Manager.
Clint.
Sorry, I'm seeing Town of Orono underneath your name and then Clint under. So, anyways.
Zach is Clint today. Hi, Zach.
Yes, thank you. We have Town Manager Clint and Finance Manager Zach. So the lack of names underneath is throwing me off. So, anyways, thank you. So the agenda we have today, as I have it, is quick update on Clint and my meeting with the Boy Scouts, review of the financial reports that Zach sent around, discussion of the spending policy, and then the bulk of it, Clint will be going over the budget schedule, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Any other additions, questions, comments? Okay. Does anybody have a preference in the order that we go? Okay. Well, let's just take off Boy Scouts since that's easy. So Sarah, Clint and I met with slew. There were 5 or 6 representatives from different contingencies of the Cub Scouts.
Yep.
And so they would like to take over the building. As they've been meeting there since way before any of our times. My original concerns, and I got the sense that the overall concerns of the council were, whether the Cub Scouts had the resources to one, update the building, but 2, maintain it. And so instead of the Cub Scouts taking over the building, KCI will take over the building. And so KCI, so KCI. Perfect. Okay.
It's good. The Katahdin Area Council, right? Or something
like
that? So
it's the asset holding entity of the Katahdin Area Council. So okay. KCI holds Camp Roosevelt and is basically the source of all of the council's money.
Got it.
So knowing that they are involved, I have no additional questions or concerns about, the Cub Scouts' ability to, undertake this, since it would be owned by KCI. It does have to be approved by the KCI board, which they are meeting the end of January to discuss this. But Clint, correct me here. I got the impression from Glenn that, this is a conversation they've been having. So unless something substantive changes, the KCI board is likely to approve this, but it has to go through that process. From our side, the town side, Clint is working with Isabel, and he just sent an email to me today about how we would actually transfer that, whether there actually is a deed associated with the property since it's so old. It sounds like there maybe, Clint?
We found the deed. It's just a short and sweet.
Yep.
Know by all ye present that is the way it read.
So we as a town would transfer it free and clear to the Cub Scouts. Now,
is it Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts?
Well, so the Cub Scout pack and the Boy Scout troop would use the building like they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of the things that Clint and I discussed with them, and I said this is pretty important to the town, is if there's some community aspect to the building. And they said they'd be more than happy to talk to whoever wants to do the gear library and really, keep it open to the public. I think we should outline that in a MOU of some sort, but I'm comfortable with it. So as far as the actual, I also have reached out to Bob at the Historical Society. Haven't heard back from him, but I talked to Melissa Garrity, who is on their executive committee, and she said that the Historical Society doesn't have the resources to take over the building.
Yeah.
But again, the Cub Scouts, the Boy Scouts are more than happy to work with the Historical Society. So from a process standpoint, I mean, this would have to go through council. Clint and I also, or Clint brought it up and I agree. I mean, I would assume, even though we're not required to, we should hold a public hearing, and I would like to, make this as transparent as possible, so it doesn't look like the town is just, giving away town assets.
Mhm. Thanks. That's really helpful. It sounds like a really productive meeting. So
It really
thank you
was.
guys for having it.
It was like
And it sounds-
half an hour. It was great. Short, sweet, and to the point. But no, knowing KCI is involved is really helpful. So
Mhm.
I mean, unless, I guess, let me talk to Leo, but unless you're adamantly opposed moving forward, I think we should get this on the agenda for sometime for one of the January meetings, just to make sure nobody on council is fully opposed to this process, and then, go from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense to me. I had a couple thoughts. I am not opposed at all. I think it's a
Yep.
good idea. My thoughts are, in the discussions with the Historical Society, I don't think that there ever was any belief that the Historical Society had the ability to actually buy the building and take it over the way the Boy Scouts does.
Okay.
I think that was a very different proposal. Like in the original Haley Ward discussions, was that the town would maintain ownership of the building, and that the town would turn it into some display space for the Historical Society, right? It's a very different model.
Yep.
If you look at that Haley Ward report. And, so I just think in those discussions with the Historical Society, if we're decided as a council that we definitely want not to own the building anymore, then I don't think, that that's a possibility. But at the time, the various options were, out working with the Boy Scouts for the Boy Scouts to take it over and continue to use it, or turning it into some kind of town-owned space that would be historical exhibition space. So
okay.
I think, as you're taking it back to council, those will be the things people had heard in the past.
Okay.
And then my only other things I wanted to ask were, I really liked these bullet points you presented, very, very helpful. On the reversion to the town language, it says that they would be comfortable with a reversion to the town if they can't meet the goal or maintain it. I mean, I guess I'm just curious. I'm assuming that language would sound something like, in a legal write-up, it would sound something like, if after a certain number of years, the structural issues have deteriorated further, or these basic benchmarks haven't been met, then the town has the right to, require that it be reverted to us. Is that the sort of language you're talking about? That if they're not making any progress on these basic structural issues by a certain time frame, the town has a right to ask for the property, to require the property back, but not that we have to take it back, right?
Yeah.
Because I also don't want us to be in a situation of like, they don't do anything on it, now it's gonna fall down and, oh, it's yours, right? So I assume the language would be written to say that we have the ability to require it back at that point at our ask, but not that we have to take it, right?
Yeah, we specifically talked to them about that piece, and so they are fundraising. They would be fundraising for this. KCI has the money, but they asked us to essentially give them what, Clint? I don't remember exactly, but 6 months, 12 months, etc., to kind of make these improvements, etc. So basically, like a grace period. But yeah, they were comfortable with it coming back to the town, because I made that point specifically, that I don't want you guys sitting on it for 5 years and then all of a sudden saying, oh, by the way, take this back, we don't know what to do with it. So yeah.
So you think it's a shorter time frame than the one I said?
I'm open to, that's not time frame I'm not hung up on.
Well, so I mean, this is a forever transfer. How long do you want to maintain this right, Sarah?
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Like, this to me wasn't very clear.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the hard part here is, I mean, so 250 years from now, that building's in bad shape and we've got a deed that says whatever we say it says. What do we
Mhm.
want it to say? You know?
I think that's what I'm saying, is that we need to clarify some of that as we're bringing this back to council. Like, here's a suggestion that we're making, that it be within 12 months, they've met these benchmarks, or we have we have a right to require it back. But I
I
personally
think they
don't
said
want it.
something about 5 years though. I know that because there was something about some of the money that they have that was about a 5 year.
Yeah,
There was a
5 years.
building
Okay.
that may come to them in the next 5 years or so.
Yeah,
So I think
4
that
to
was
That's
5
with
part of
years.
the
it.
estate or trust or something. That's right. Yep.
Yeah, there was a trust or something. Yeah. So let us, I mean, if you're good with that, I'll work on that. I mean, that's more legalese too. We
Yeah,
want some sort of reversion, but I think it's got to be one that stands the test of time.
I agree. I think there needs to be some time limit on it. And I also think the language needs to be, as I said, written in such a way that, we have a right as a town to require it back, but that we don't have to take it back. I don't know what could have happened to it in the interim, but I don't think we want to be saddled with getting it if some, major disaster has happened to it. We want our ability
Well, on
to.
the other side, if they go spend 250,000 in a improvement, you
Yeah.
Right.
know,
Could
it's
there be
theirs.
something
Oh,
like
Jesus. Where
you
did
got
you come from, Leo? I did not even see you join.
you
Hi,
did?
Leo.
How'd you miss me? I don't have my tiara on, that's why.
Happy birthday. Yeah.
Um, I mean, yeah, I would think it'd be more like some kind of performance thing that says in 5 years, if XYZ isn't done, we have an option to, or something like that. But I mean, I think Clint was saying this, and Sarah, maybe you were too, that it should expire. This isn't an infinite, okay,
Yeah.
we take it
And the other,
back in 30
and again,
years.
I think we're going to reserve a right of first refusal if they ever transferred.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they
And
don't
yes,
want it anymore, they can't sell it. We get it first. Town's
yeah,
first option.
Yeah,
I agree. And Leo, I did say the same thing when I started. I said, I think you were just coming on, that there should be some benchmarks. Like, if certain things haven't been done by the 5 year mark, then we have this right to
And
request it.
that's
I
actually,
agree there have to.
this is actually going to come together pretty good because if we get a right of first refusal because they don't want it anymore, then we get our choice to take it or not if it's got to disrepair or even if it's a good repair. Yeah. And then the performance side, give them 10 years to get it up to date or sooner. And
Yeah.
at which point
So,
we
Leo,
won't
I
take
don't
it
know
back.
when you joined, but are you opposed to this transfer? Because I'm going to recommend or this us having a discussion at the next one of the January council meetings.
yeah, and that's a good, thank you for asking, because I don't know like what's gone on, and I can't remember now. I mean, I know the Boy Scouts showed up and spoke. How did we get here how did we get to this point where it sounds like we're ready to do a transaction with these
So
guys?
Clint and I met with representatives from the Cub Scout troop, the Boy Scouts, and then also KCI. And so KCI, which holds the assets for the council and has financial stability, would be taking ownership of this building for the scouts to use. The scouts also agreed to work with community members if there's been talk of a gear library there or something, but to make sure that there still is a community purpose to this building.
How do you
Leo,
ensure that? How do you ensure that?
I mean,
I
we have
just
to do
kind of
some
want
type of MOU or something to that extent.
And are we talking about just transferring it for a buck or for nothing, or what are we talking about?
Probably a buck.
Well,
Whatever
yes.
we legally can, yeah. I would suggest that they cover all the legal costs associated with transferring it. But yeah, I mean, given the state of the building, was my thought.
and Leo, if your question is broader, I mean, I think there is a bigger, picture about how we got here, which is that for years now, when these buildings started being looked at and Haley Ward started making these reports, they met with all the community groups for, as I understood it, over a year of time or more. And that report, all those meetings and all those discussions and community conversations that happened, the only suggested uses for this building were either that it continue to be the Boy Scout building or that it be continued to be owned by the town and turned into some kind of exhibit space for the historical society. Those were the only two suggested uses for the building through that lengthy process. So I think that's why, you know, we're at this point of talking to the Boy Scouts and also checking in with the Historical Society as the two places to check in with, because for years now and all this lengthy community process, those are the only two uses that ever got proposed.
But it wasn't ever put out like a, you know, so now I mean, I kind of, not selfishly, but I sort of want the Boy Scouts to have it too, but I just want to also make sure we're not like playing favorites, I guess. Like,
And
so,
that's why as part of this process, we will have a public hearing. And I would be prepared that if anybody in the community is opposed for and has a tangible alternative plan to not ultimately approve this.
so
Mhm.
how is it zoned? Could somebody buy this thing and make it a small, tiny home?
Possibly. So the trick here is that we're selling it for under our bid threshold. If you're
Mhm.
disposing of property and we were gonna make more than 500. So this appears to be more of a situation where we're in a unique circumstance in the sense that they've used it for so long, the council's gonna be making a determination, which is why I like the public hearing side of it. But yes, it could be, it would be a tough buildable lot, but in worst case scenario, the footprint of the building that's there could be a footprint of a new home.
Although I bet you the abutters would have something to say about that. They're okay with the current plan.
Yeah, that's a moot point, but you know, they really don't. No offense. I mean, I just got off the phone with my buddy Keith who lives next door, so I'm not crapping on him, but I mean, that's kind, I feel like that's a little bit of a moot point. But and the other thing was there was a 90-year lease or something that we can't put our hands on. Is that right with this thing? I
Yes,
guess so.
didn't
There's
know that.
allegedly a 90-year lease.
To the Boy Scouts?
Yeah, we've been told on council we don't know, but we were told on council that there was some 90 or 99 year, I thought it was 99, Leo, but it was some lease that everyone thought had existed with the Boy Scouts, but nobody was able to find. And as of a very long time ago, right, Leo, in what we were told, like we might be 70 years in or something more into that lease by now.
Yeah.
Well, there'll be, I
Yeah.
mean, if the lease got recorded, it'll be
So
recorded in the registry of deeds and it'll be part of a
I'll
title.
give you a little history. The lease never got recorded. It was a handshake a long, long time ago, but part of that lease was they were supposed to maintain the building. And as we can see where we are right now, that didn't happen either. So there were some issues there. And when we talked to them the first time about them taking it over, they just didn't have, it was the local group didn't have the wherewithal to do anything. And so that's kind of where we are now. There is no lease anywhere that anybody can put their hands on.
Okay.
But
So
the
that's
conversation
Mitch.
was there was a handshake a long time ago that they could use it.
okay. Thanks.
Thanks,
So
Mitch.
yeah, just kind of again trying to come up to speed here. I again, it feels like the right thing to do, or feels like the easy thing to do. I want to make sure though it doesn't come across like we're playing some kind of favorites, and also at the end of the day, if someone wanted to buy that and make a little house out of it and wanted to buy it for 50,000, we give it away for $1. Is that? And it's not, if it were like, well, I don't even want to go into, well, this was part of our plan and we, you know, it's not, but, and I'm not a huge fan of that argument, but, you know, and what do do you get what I'm saying? Is that making?
No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I guess my attitude is the Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts have been using this since the dawn of time. From the sounds of what Sarah said, they have been the only interested party in this. As far as knocking it down, or selling it to a developer is going to knock it down and throw a tiny house up in there, I think. I mean, it's on the state registry of historical, which doesn't really, according to Isabel, doesn't mean a lot. But I think if somebody were to knock it down, the old schoolhouse or old firehouse in Orono, that would cause a bigger uproar than us giving it to the Boy Scouts for $1.
And I mean, but I don't know that they have to knock it down versus using it and building it into that whatever home or something, right? They wouldn't necessarily, and that was another question I had. Is part of the deal that this will stay? I mean, I think it's the only historically registered in town or
Mhm.
something that we have.
Mm-hmm.
It'll part of
Yeah.
what, if we convey to them that we're maintaining that, it's gonna maintain that, correct? Is that in the lease or in the deed or in the something?
Correct.
Yeah, Leo, that was my question too. I wanted to be sure that it was gonna have a stipulation that they had to maintain it. I thought it was on the National Historic Registry. It's not,
It's
it's
on
only
the
on the state.
National Historic Register of Historic Places.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, I knew
Isabel's
it was
giving
less
information what it
formal.
means. And
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's important that, again, whatever this agreement is, has a specification that it has to stay on the National Historic, whatever
But you gotta
registry
remember,
it's
that
on.
means they can do with it what they want.
Say again?
There's no
What?
requirements, and again, this is what Isabel's sharing. They can do what they want with it.
I don't understand what you mean by that, because it will come off the National Registry. If they do certain things with it, it automatically comes off.
It can, but it's automatically on. They've taken no federal money to improve it. And this is kind of what we started talking to the committee. If at some point they could not fix it and they need to tear it down to fix it because it's in such disrepair, it may come off the National Historic Register of Historic Places, in that the building's been replaced and there'd be photos and it'd be commemorated that this used to stand here. And then
Right.
it would show photos, but they could put a brand new building on that tomorrow. And it could
They
still be a
can.
historic place.
Okay, that wasn't my understanding when I had the earlier discussion, but maybe it's because of the difference between historic place and historic registry. I don't know. But my understanding was, Clint, anybody can do what they want anytime, but my understanding was it comes off the registry if you alter the building in significant ways. So I
Well,
think,
I'll check more with Isabel on that, but I don't think it comes off, but I'll double check with Isabel.
okay, well, I would want some clarity on that, because I think there is a way to be able to write the stipulation to say that it has to stay on, or there's a financial penalty or something that they pay to the town if they choose to, take the steps that would take it off that.
Yeah.
Because I think what's important to the town is the historic nature of that building. Like, people in town who are invested in that, when you talk to the Historical Society, what they don't want is the building greatly altered so that you can't see anymore, the history. And there are I understood there to be clear regulations from the Historic Registry side about, it's why for example, the Keith Anderson house is off, because way too much was altered in that building. So it's not eligible to be on the registry because it's been altered in way too significant ways, is what I was told. So we need some clarity on
yeah,
that, I
so
think,
that's-
because
yeah.
I think Leo has a point that people in town care about that, the historic nature of it, and making sure that if we're going to do this for this, deal, that they're going to keep it on in the status, which would keep it on there.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
think some do. I mean, I don't, again, I'm not, it seems relevant and it seems like something that should be retained if we can. I don't know it's the be all end all, but to your point, Sarah, I think we need to understand where it goes, because that's back to my previous comment saying if someone put we need single family homes. What if someone put a single family home in there, a small one, use that building, maintain that versus, or if what Clint's saying, I think I just heard, if they tore down, put a new one up, it's still a historical place. I don't know if if I heard correctly, or if that's correct or not, but we need to understand, we need to know what happens.
Yeah. So sorry, in the interest of time, yes. So historical, yes, it's got to stay in place, or we have to understand it. So Leo, then, I mean, the other option is, because it sounds like you may be opposed to talking about this at council level. I mean, the other option is to put it out to RFP, and I don't want to do that. I think that is overly complicating this and
No, I don't, and I don't, I'm not opposed to talking about it at
Okay.
council level.
Okay.
I want to make sure that it's advertised, and I want, like we all do, like it always is, I guess, but I also what if someone in the audience says, hey, shows up that wants to give 100,000 for that building? Like, just a hypothetical scenario here. I'd like that spot. I'll give it, what if I decide I'll give 100,000 for it, and I'm going to build me a little home there?
That seems to be a conflict of interest, but
Not
notwithstanding
me.
that,
Well, no, but the
um,
neighbors have said, I mean, and this is not official, but they've called me and said they don't want to see it sold publicly, they want it. But again, the reality is that if we were to try to sell it to either of those two neighbors, it would have to go to bid.
It
Because
would.
our anticipation would be, it would be over 500. So I think what you're getting at, Leo, is how do you weave this? And this is gonna be a council decision. By policy, we're selling it for less than 500. It's not going to bid.
Yeah, and like I said, ultimately, I think I'm like probably you are too. It's like Boy Scout, and I don't know what it'd be interesting to know how they've used this. I don't know to what level. If they use it once a year, they use it every month. I don't know. And it's a decent little,
yeah. Okay.
place for them. And they've been the only ones to use it. No one else really cared about it theoretically. I'm for that. I just want to be above board with everything we're doing.
All right,
Yep.
so I will put together a memo reflecting this and for you all to review, and the intention would be to get it in front of council in January. Cool.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Zach, and again, can you give us, like a 7-minute run through of the time? I don't mean to be rushing through these, but I want to keep us to the hour limit. So, but I also think it's important to review the financial reports of the town, because that is one of the charges of this committee. So, given that at least I am unfamiliar with municipal finances, I think, can you just walk us through the 3 reports that you sent?
Sure, I can do that. So the 2 reports that I sent from Trio say Finance Committee right across the top. Those are our expenses and revenues up to this point. If you're looking at the revenue report right now, the property taxes are currently unbudgeted. Typically, as part of the budget process, there's an adjusting journal that I do to budget those. Trio is having some issues after the last update that's making it difficult to pull accurate reports right now. So that's kind of been backburnered until that's fixed. So those are typically, in the past, these have been the reports that have been pulled with the Finance Committee. My understanding is that they kind of give them a brief overview, anything that kind of stands out that you guys want to ask about. We seem to be in a pretty good spot expense-wise. We're about 42% expended, coming up on about roughly halfway through the fiscal year. Seems to be a pretty good place to me. Revenues are looking pretty good as well, coming through. Property taxes are going well and everything. And then the 3rd report in there that I included for you guys is kind of a draft. If you remember back in the budget process, we had the OMRs for each department. This is kind of what me and Clint have been working on this, and this is what we're thinking will be kind of the replacement for the OMRs, is just kind of a very succinct visual summary and some very high level highlights of each department as we work into the budget process. So my hope is that this will replace the OMR and kind of give you guys a little bit of a brief summary of each department without quite getting as detailed as we did last fiscal year during the budget.
I loved this 3rd report, Zach. I thought this was awesome. I looked at this and thought, wow, this is just exactly what I was hoping to see. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Zach, do you remember, yeah, thanks. And I'm just looking at that 3rd report now, but, do you remember, I mean, we had in the past a summary, like, kind of like the summary, it was like I can't remember if it was 1 page or 2 page. Sarah, you remember, kind of like that July through November expenses, only it was like 2 pages.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that one?
I think it might be the same report. So there's different levels of detail I can pull this report with.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the full detail in a summary report. So that might
Yeah.
have just been a more condensed version of this report.
Yeah, it might just be like, so general government, I'm looking community development. It might just be though, start out at public safety.
We
It
can
might
bring
just
those for
be,
the next
and I don't
month.
know, what's that?
We can bring those next month. We could do, I said start with detail and they can always tell us to go back.
Yeah.
Don't go the other
Yeah,
way.
no, I think that's a good call. And but I think from a month, do we agree, I guess, that we want to see that we talked about this before the wheels came off, and well, you weren't here, Jake, but
I was gonna say, we haven't talked about anything, so at this point,
yeah,
I'm open to whatever you want to see.
Sarah and I had met with Sophie and kind of had this down to, we want to be at least looking at these every month in the finance,
Mhm.
kind of like this, not like to dwell on, but take 5 minutes and just see where we're at percentage wise. Have
Mhm.
Zach tell us if anything's out of whack, or just if he sees anything coming that could put us out of whack, and just to kind of touch on it. But, and so, yeah, good call on the detail, but I think that's a good one too, for just the, whatever they're, however you, what would you say, like 20, public safety? What level do you call that? I'll forget, but you know what I
Departmental.
mean? Is that departmental?
Yes.
Okay. So just with the department, yeah, Public Works, 30.
Yep,
Kind of.
so just far less detail, just a very
I'm-
high level.
I'm
Yeah.
okay condensing this. I don't need to see the individual line items,
Mhm.
but I'm one of three, so.
Well, we did stop at that. I said, don't show them every transaction and
Yeah.
every.
That would have been like a 300-page report at that point.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
tonight I'm going home.
If we could have that printed for each meeting, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
In the council packet too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Lordy.
Trying to keep the
Lordy,
paper
lordy.
industry in business.
So Leo, Sarah, I mean, what do you detail wise? Is there anything for next month? So the goal is to review these on a monthly basis. Is there anything else you want to see more of? What you want to see less of? Now's
Now's
Um,
the time.
now's
I
the
guess my
time.
thinking
Thank you.
is if Leo, if you're wanting to see that, why don't we next month see this same report that we got this month and the one Leo's asking for, and let's compare them and then figure out which one we want to have going forward. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, and now I'm looking at the revenue one, and I'm thinking like general government revenue. You got taxes and then 10 lines, intergovernmental revenues, 10 lines. Maybe in this, and I'm gonna go back and look too. Maybe it's that the other bolded lines. So general government, and I don't know how many bolded lines you would have under general government, but might be.
Revenue's easier because there's fewer lines. It's just
This
above the
might be
line, so it's
17. You
easier
got
to
like
summarize.
17 use. Well, I don't know what use of funds. That's undesignated funds, use of carry forwards. Yeah, I think under the revenue, if you do the department, oh, it's not department, it's the revenue line, and then the
Yep.
bolded ones that make that up.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
Right.
makes sense. I can
It
definitely do
would
that.
cut
for you.
out a
Right.
bunch. Like, what is
On-
this?
Kind of on both of the reports, Leo, right? If we just got
Yeah.
the bold lines and not the details underneath is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I was just,
Huh.
I would go back and
Yeah.
look at expenses. Yeah,
I think it's the same. Yeah.
yeah, finance, IT, town council, yes.
Mhm.
That makes sense, not just the department, but the bolded stuff, Zach,
Yep, I can do
on
that.
the expense too, cool. I think
Okay.
that's perfect.
Yeah, I can certainly condense it down, and then as part of that process, I'll usually, it's a good habit at this time too, when we're pulling these, that I'll do kind of the in-depth detail review just to see if anything stands out to me in case something got like miscoded. It's a good chance for us to catch errors and correct them kind of as we're going through the fiscal year. So that's
Yeah.
certainly.
When do we typically get our pilot payment from Maine? That jumped out at me, that big zero there.
Mhm.
Hopefully sooner this year. Last year, it got a little lost in the mail because we weren't sure who was handling it. I think it was like hot potato with that $600,000 invoice, and people just kept putting it in other people's mailboxes. But we
Getting it across the river's tough, I understand.
but I think this year we have a dedicated person who's going to be handling it, so I'm hoping we can get that turned around a little bit quicker this year.
Okay, cool. All right. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? Perfect. Thank you, Zach. Clint, how much time do you need for budget discussion?
Well, we're gonna do it.
Well, I know. How much time do you need? Can
10
we talk
minutes.
about spending policy, or do you need the last half an hour to
10
talk?
minutes.
What's that?
10 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So we got like 10 minutes to discuss the financing policy. So I circulated, so after Zach, Clint, and I talked last month, I took a stab at revisions to the cash disbursement policy. I was under the impression, incorrectly so, that this was just in policy, nothing needed to be changed through ordinance, which, so now, because the bid process is talked about in ordinance. So that in my mind makes this a little more complicated, because changing an ordinance, I don't know if that's,
Well, and again, and I would just say prior conversations, Jacob, and maybe I should have shared this sooner and maybe it didn't come out. And that's why I'm like, I'm going to share this today. Just so
Yeah.
you understand. I think the ordinance is workable. And so the
okay,
question we have is that has the scope creep of having a policy and the ordinance created this confusion, and maybe we should be just taking our policies and saying, make them more similar to the ordinance and leave it as an ordinance for now, because when you look in the ordinance, there's really like everything that we've talked about, like the concerns I have of, well, it's an emergency
Yes.
purchase, it's there. Well, I don't want to go to bid. Okay, here's how you can go about not going to bid. A lot of it is really covered. The $50,000 threshold, I mean, let the ordinance review committee deal with that when they look at it, maybe in the future, but, or if you want to make a recommendation to them. But
Yeah.
not, the 50,000 is not hurting us too bad, and it's kind of getting us out of these situations where I was worried that we have these large projects that are high cost. Well, when I look at that policy, it's over 50. Yes, we're supposed to go to bid. However, all the ones I'm worried about, like engineering firms and consulting firms and people we have contracts that the councils are approving, it's all good. We met those requirements when we did them, like trash service. You went out for proposals. There was only 2 companies interested. And now only one of those companies exists. And so they've been getting the negotiated contract. I really don't think we have the concerns I initially thought we would have.
Okay. So what about the one thing that jumped out to me in the ordinance is small purchases over $2,500. It says insofar as practical for purchases over this threshold, no less than 3 businesses shall be solicited. That seems cumbersome.
Jacob,
is.
what part, can you tell me where you are in the ordinances?
Sorry,
What
this
section?
is article, what Clint sent. It's
I sent it
actually,
today. It's chapter 2.
thank you.
I'm in there.
Fiscal-
I just am asking you what part of
Page
it.
3,
Section. Okay,
page 3, subsection C, small purchases.
okay, thank you. Yep.
So, and a perfect example of that one is today. We need to get some cleaning services for a short period of time because we have some things going on where we need someone to come in and backfill. Came in, it's going to be so many dollars an hour for so many hours for 12 weeks, and we're over 2,500. So I had to go back and say, go get a couple other numbers from a couple other vendors. This is one of those ones where I think if that ordinance number was a little higher than 2,500, it would remove the issue I have that from time to time, we just need a vendor that can help us really quick and do this service for us, i.e. fill a gap for cleaning for a few months.
Tell me where, sorry, can you explain where this is again? Page 3?
Yep, page 3.
I can share it.
Small
Under
purchases?
small purchases.
Okay. So, I mean, what does insofar as practical mean?
Yeah.
I debated with that one today because it's funny we're doing this, and when that request came in, so far as practical, is it really practical to get a couple quotes for a cleaning service that we need for 3 months when we have a vendor we know that can come in right now and do it?
Subjective, I guess, but my answer would be no.
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So sorry to hijack you a little bit, Jacob, on the conversation, but
No, this is great. Sounds like we don't have to do anything.
We're actually thinking then that we don't need to do anything to the policy and procedures manual?
Well,
I'm confused.
so I still think the policy and procedures, because the policy and procedures manual, so the ordinances, correct me here, Clint, the ordinance, don't specifically discuss dollar thresholds for when it has to go to council, when it doesn't. That is discussed in the policies and procedures.
Is that correct, Clint?
correct, we got, yeah,
Okay.
and we should be, what we should be doing is making the policy and procedures perfectly mimic ordinance. And then when the ordinance changed, you could update your policy and procedure.
But currently the ordinances don't say anything about when it has to go to council for a vote.
Well,
I think that's what
yes,
we
it
need to
doesn't. I
clarify.
mean, the rule I have is if we're signing a contract, council has to approve a contract.
Sure.
But go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need some clarity on that because I agree that it needs to, obviously has to match the ordinances. But if the ordinances don't clearly specify when things have to go to council for a vote, I do think we should update that in the policy and procedures manual so that we have it, where council wants that to be. If it's in the ordinances somewhere, I would like, if you guys could maybe bring this back to us, telling us like where in the ordinances it actually is addressing these same limits that Jacob is proposing.
Yeah.
Because, Jacob, I looked at what you did and I think you've hit the categories that matter because, I pulled up the RSU policies online. Theirs are easy to access online, right? And I pulled them up and they have the same categories, right? This
Yeah.
breakdown of basically when something is within an already approved budget, how big does the number have to be before it has to come to council for a vote, right? That's the first category, right? And as I think you were proposing in your proposal, it had to be, more than 10,000 to have to come to a vote if it's already part of an approved budget. I
Mhm.
looked at the RSUs and theirs says it has to be 50,000 or more if it's within an approved budget before it has to come back for a vote, right? But it's the same category, right? And I think that category is important. I think the other category you have is when something's going out of the budget, it has to come to council for a vote.
Yeah.
And I think you set a 0 threshold for that. If it's going out of budget at all, it has to come to council for a vote. The
Yeah.
RSU actually says it has to be more than 10,000 out of the budget over the budget before it has to come to a vote, right? And they have something similar to your third category also about the contracts. I think you wrote, I'd have to look back again. I think theirs was somewhat simpler. It just said for anything that's more than a 3-year contract, it has to come to council for them for a vote. And yours basically said every 4 years it had to be looked at and, brought
Yeah.
to the finance committee and potentially back. So I think those 3 categories about what's the threshold when it's already within the approved budget, how much is it allowed to go over without having to come for a vote? Is that $1 or is it some other number? And then, contracts, how often are we looking at contracts? So they don't just sort of keep automatically renewing forever without council ever taking a look at them.
Yeah.
Those 3 categories I think are important. So if those are already addressed somewhere in this ordinance, I haven't had the time to go through and find them. If you guys know exactly where they're already in the ordinance, if they're there, then I don't think we need to do the policy, but I didn't think they were in here on a quick look through. So
I
that's,
don't think
thank
they
you.
are either, but I will review in time for next meeting, and have a bigger discussion.
Yeah.
Leo, what are your 7 minutes? What are your thoughts on this?
Sarah, I could have sworn we had a link, maybe it was just, I was on before you. I
Yeah,
could have sworn we had so many meetings talking about this and we went from 5 to 75.
we did. We did.
Okay.
I was there at the end of them. I don't know that I was there
Okay.
at the beginning of those. We did. And so I think your
So
question
this
is valid.
schmuck Jake comes along and now it's 10?
I think it's a valid, I think it's a valid question about what that threshold should be, Leo. We had that round of discussions, as I said, I looked and like the RSU threshold is way higher than that. So I think there's a range. I'd be curious to hear from Clint, what's typical
Well,
in
the
his
issue here
experience,
is that
but
expenses greater than 7,500, if that's the rule.
Mhm.
Leo, we do that 10, 15 times a month, minimum.
Wait,
Minimum.
10 or 15 times a month, we're approving a,
You're rarely approving them, and we're spending over $7,500 on a single vendor multiple times a month. I mean, Zach, ballpark,
Yeah, that sounds about right, 10 or 15.
and the rule is expenses greater than 7,500. What do you mean by that? Does not mean that we get a contract for Trio software. That's over 7,500. I've never seen a council that says we got to see that expense. Because when it says that council sees, that's not a committee, that's not a thing, that's an agenda item and a vote.
yeah.
We're going to be voting.
I know. I
on
wish
the
I could.
law.
I mean, yeah, I know. On its face and time, I wish I could remember the argument for even having it. to be honest, to Sarah's
Right.
point, it's like it's
Yeah.
approved, it's in the budget. What are we doing this for? I
Right.
get that. It seemed like
And
there
that's
must have
why
been
our-
some argument for doing it.
And I
I
think
think-
that's where our ordinance is getting better, because the ordinance sets a threshold that pretty much the town manager is your purchasing agent up to 50 grand. And then when it gets over 50 grand, I'm supposed to come see the council. And that's where I'm saying, I think we're good there, because on those over 50, like one of the ones would be your curbside trash. Well, I don't bring that every time. That was put out to bid 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it was. It's over 50. We're all good. That council approved it. I'm just continuing to spend that money.
But you're cutting on the regular, you're cutting checks for above 10 or 15 a month, checks a month above 75,000, 7,500. Is that what you're saying, Zach?
Oh,
Yep.
at least, right, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, that might even seem low, especially during like the summer months when there's all the capital projects are going on and, they're cutting checks for pavement and, some of the other projects that come in. And there are like curbside pickup's a good example. Every month that is definitely over $7,500.
So does this maybe make more sense at the $50,000 level, I think is my question, Clint, because that would actually match the ordinances. And I mean, that does seem like more in line with where, I don't know
As
other
long as
towns,
we
but
understand a $50,000 is not an expense. It's so we go out to bid and
Mhm.
we hire an engineering firm for $300,000. Their first bill is 56,000. You will have approved that contract.
Yeah, we wouldn't need to do it on a
I'm not
contract.
coming back every time we expense over 50,000. It's any service, it's the contract is approved by the council, so it's more of a contract approval rate. And then the other expenditures, I mean, we, again, repair, when again, it's an emergency purchase. So I think the ordinance is the key, and I think to kind of help the conversation, and I know it's all coming together in pieces, I think if Jacob and I and Matt and Zach spend a little time before the next meeting on the two, and I'll lead this charge with you, Jacob and Zach.
Yeah.
Zach and I can get you some really good detail and some suggestions
Mhm.
and some questions. And then you can kind of go from there on
Yep.
those. Cause I've got great notes here and I think I
Mhm.
know what you're after. And I think now we can assemble it better.
Yeah, I just am trying to not simplify the process because Leo doesn't like when I try to make things more efficient, but develop a process that we are able to follow every single time instead of kind of this piecemeal.
Yep.
No, yeah, God, I hate efficiency, but
Yeah.
the I really want to. I think I wish I knew. Do you anyone any idea when that was? Because on its face, I think I go, why the heck are we even touching it? It's in the
Right.
budget, it's approved, but we did. That's what I'm scratching my head about, and I can't figure out why now.
I mean, it might also go back to just a public transparency thing too, is yes, our financials are available to the public, but who's actually going to request a report from Zach and comb through it? Whereas if the public knows that any expense over X amount gets talked about in a public forum, that at least is
know.
more transparent.
Maybe,
That's
but
what I
also
like the idea that whether it's consent calendar or action item, they're hitting. They're there. If you don't like it on the consent calendar, you pull it.
Yeah.
You'll move somewhere
Yeah.
else. So
Yeah.
I think we got a good handle of this.
Okay.
okay. And,
So we're gonna get
having the monthly reports too, like that reflects that money you just spent on the. I mean, in real
Yeah.
time, it reflects
Yep.
it. So
Well, and
Yeah.
Clint came up with a really esoteric example last time about, whatever, overspending without council approval or something like that. And I forget exactly what the scenario was, but my response was then the auditors would catch it and Clint would be fired. So, I mean, there are safeguards built into this process.
you
So-
do like
Right.
efficiency.
Didn't even
Wow,
make
look
it
at
6
that.
months and we're already getting conversations about hypothetically being fired.
Listen,
Oh my
you're
God.
trying to I'm just saying
kinda-
auditors are there for a
Who
reason.
says that? Who says
All right.
something like?
I want to be sure to give
Jesus.
Clint his time.
Yeah.
I think this is a great discussion and
All right.
I want to see a proposal that comes back with maybe some different figures in there, but that
Yep.
still has these same 3 categories is all I
Yep.
want to say. Like, I think
That
those
sounds
categories
perfect.
matter. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, cool. Clint, take it.
Okay, so long story short, I shared out a calendar for the budget. I want the council to approve this. I want to have a meeting with staff this week. Did it share?
Where is this, Clint?
I shared it to you in an email
How long ago?
last week.
If you go into the shared drive, into our shared drive,
You're all commenters. I'll do it again
Okay.
right now.
Yeah, would you?
Okay.
Thanks.
So, and commenter.
You go
So
to
again, this is what I'd like to bring to the council next month, because that's so as the calendar, there's some work here, December 3rd, December 11th, Zach and I, today, this is us, we're meeting right now. And then what it talks is that I've got an all-day staff, senior staff planning meeting on the 18th where we start doing our budget work. January, I start internal meetings on budget. January 13th, the council would approve the calendar. February, calling out a potluck on the budget. Looks like a good community engagement window. On the 26th, the draft budgets are due to the town manager. Draft. Then on March 7th, I'll have reviewed and start more internal budget review meetings. March 13th, the council would have a big picture budget of the Orono municipal only and for the council and the public. And I also want to make sure with too, the January 13th, when you adopt the calendar, this is where I'd like the council to have its first stab at budget priorities. Beyond your goals, what are your expectations for the fiscal year budget? You know, kind of just share them out there so we know, you know, so for example, we want to build an airport, Clint. It's 7-zip, go figure it out, put it in the budget. We're building an airport. Okay. The airport will be in there. Okay.
I'm a little concerned that airport keeps being used as an example.
Hey,
This is
It's
not the
gonna get
first
us in
time I've
trouble.
heard of that.
yeah. And I know it's who told me this anyway, but so then, so with that, then we would come into March 13th where we would give you the first, the big picture municipal budget, and then you would see the first capital improvement plan. This is a big switch. Capital improvement plan's coming to you early and by itself. And then what we would want to do is that while this is going on, most of March would be capital improvement plan. In fact, when the 31st, and again, I always put this in when you're taking action, the finance committee and operations committee would host that meeting. You're not adopting a budget, but you're kind of giving us, yes, keep working with this, or here's our comments, what we need you to change. Then in April, the budget gets finished and entered into the municipal accounting system for the regular municipal budget. You would adopt a capital plan on the 14th, and then we would start printing the remainder of the budget, every other department. So they'd all come out to you by the 23rd of April. And here's the next big switch. We would have a meeting at the end of April. And again, your second discussion of the big picture, we would bring in a little bit more detail because you've done a lot of refinement through the year. And we could start to give you a better projection on revenues at that time of the year because we'll have more firm numbers. Revenue sharing will be closer, but they won't approve it till June, probably like always. And then May starts your budget workshops. And what I did here is that there's only two. The first there's only two with staff dedicated to you. We broke the town into two parts. The first one's community development, parks, library, general government. And then the second one, and if you get done more, we could slide things ahead. And then this next one would be police, fire, public works, and wastewater. And again, we put things kind of as they would lump together, so to speak. Then you've got June 2nd for yourselves for another workshop, whatever more things you want to work on. And then June 9th is a tentative date for hearing. June 16th is another workshop if you want to do more after the hearing. So hearing gives you a bunch of advice they want you to change, you have it. And then on the 23rd, we would adopt the budget at the last meeting of the fiscal year, and July 1, we start with it. You know, so it's kind of a reloading, but that's the way I'm recommending it. And if you want to make some tweaks or suggestions, I'd like to do that before I share it with the staff next week. Yeah, this week.
So I want to maybe just go back and look. I'm sorry that I didn't see this, I guess, when this email came out. The only part I'm looking at, the page you have right in front of us right now, it looks to me like on April 23rd is when we finally get as a council the full budget workbook. And then we're supposed to be having our big picture discussion 5 days later. My experience with getting these binders is that it takes a long time to actually digest them. And I know you guys are planning to do a better job or even improved job. I don't mean better, but anyhow, I'm hearing it's going to be more succinct this year, and our budget binder may not be quite so overwhelming in the amount of information that comes at us, but I am still concerned about there only being 5 days between when we get that and when we're supposed to have that big picture discussion, because it takes some time as a counselor to get through that and really digest it enough to have that big picture discussion. So I guess I'm wondering, can we get like a 2-week window or something
Well, you
instead
know,
of a
this is my
5-day
week
window?
one too, when we wrote this, Sarah, because when I wrote this, you know, and I mimicked a little bit prior year's budget processes.
Mhm.
And there was kind of this, you know, budget
Right.
finalizes, week and a half later, it's kind of printed. Week after it's printed, it's given to the council. And then 4 or 5 days later, from your council posting guidelines, you'd have your big picture conversation. I think you could slide this back, Zach, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the 17th and the 23rd could be slid back to the 14th as bullets, and we could actually just omit 17 and 23.
Yeah, I would agree. If we've already got it formatted and printed on the 14th, I don't see why we couldn't pass it out at that point.
That would be great, because from my experience, it takes me a good week plus. I'd say 2 weeks is safe to get through that thing and actually have any real sense. But that's maybe just me. Leo, do you agree? It's taken me a good 2 weeks to get through it enough to fully feel like I've got a grasp.
Yeah, and I'm kind of just going back and forth in my head here about the book. We'll do it. I mean, we end up reprinting and all that crap, and I don't love the book. I kind of wish there were. I don't love Google Docs either, so never mind. But I
Oh, you'll love my capital plan then, in the work plan I'm working on, because it's called out as one of our topics for the next year.
what is?
Google Docs.
Oh,
Okay, so that makes me feel better if we can at least have a 2-week window
Yeah.
there.
Yep.
for sure.
Okay, could we scroll back up so I can see what comes before that again? Okay,
And there's the whole, I mean, things kind of kick off at the potluck.
yeah.
Can you talk about Clint, why you jumped up the capital plan?
Because, you know, capital, I mean, it is a component of your budget, and it will create an entire department of the town. But again, the debt service payment is the portion that will fall on the taxpayers. So kind of my idea is let's start looking at our needs of a community as a capital needs budget. We know the affordability. I'll present affordability as part of the capital plan with recommendations and guidelines for what we should try to hit. But the idea is to try to come in with a capital plan where you're not, where all the needs of the town are sacrificed for the operational costs. When, you know, you built a lot of infrastructure, and if you don't maintain it, it's going to cost you more later. I mean, we all know that. You know, it's what you neglect today will cost more tomorrow. So you might as well just try to keep it up as you go. And I think it's a better way to start. I don't know if we'll always do it that way, but I think for this year, I really hear a lot about capital planning. We need to come up front with it. It needs to be uninterrupted time where we're focused, and it needs to have a couple meetings for itself. Whereas the staff budgets, police, fire, and all those other things, if we've done our work right, it's just a good opportunity where the council could ask questions, see what the staff wants to share, what you need for further follow-up, and we just kind of wrap them up quickly. And again, we're really moving to a goal where no department presents for more than a half an hour.
So
And
for
Go ahead, Leo.
I was gonna say, so for capital, I mean, what's our method for that? I really think it needs to be more kind of ground up or build up, not build up, like, let's set what you want to spend and then figure out what you want to do versus just and maybe it's semantics, but I think we should start with a limit of what we're going to spend, and then let's figure out the priorities of what we do, instead of trying to make everything like a priority and getting up to another $3 million.
I was going to kind of go the other route and do them both at the same time. It's not
Yeah.
about what you're doing, and it's not about what your capacity is. You know, I can prove really quickly this town has a greater need than what we can afford. It's a piece of cake. So then it becomes, here's the priorities. Here's the list of everything we think we need to do. And here's a 10-year plan, council, of how we want to do it. And this is our priority of what should come first. Now, are we saying do it that way? No, we're going to say we set a priority of what we think we should do and in the order. And again, it's going to be heavy on my needs, but it's also going to give this chance for staff and council to say, geez, Clint, you picked buying 10 new bicycles over buying a new police cruiser. seems like we should buy another police cruiser first. Why? And we could have that debate back and forth and see why we do what we do. But again, I don't want to, and again, it's more of too, as I'm looking at capital is what you have and what you've already invested in. When it's a new venture, it's like something you've never done before, you know, expanding something, building a new road, building a new, you know, but maintaining what we own, it's hard to argue with it. You know, you got an 80-year-old blank and it's time to replace it because it should have been done 30 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel a little differently, I guess. I feel like, you know, and if you have a limit, I mean, it's how we all do it in real life, right? We don't just say, just figure out all the things I need to do to my house. And I realize you whittle that down and whatnot, but more practically, if it's you, the homeowner, you're like, you're going to figure out what you have to spend, and then you're going to do what you can with that money.
And that's what I
So
want to talk
Leo,
about. Yeah,
like-
the mortgage component. What's the mortgage you can afford and why, and what can you do with it? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Sarah.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to say, Leo, I actually heard Clint saying a process that I thought would meet your needs. So I guess I just want to jump in for a minute and see if this is possible. Clint, I heard you saying that what we would be getting from you would be a list of capital projects that needed to be done in a priority order,
Yep.
correct? And so, Leo, to me, if we have that list in a priority order, that gives us the ability when we go into our budget discussions to be able to then say, okay, you know, ideally, we've got this priority order list and Clint and staff would like to see us get through the first, I don't know, I'm making this up, but the first 10 items on that list this year. But as we go into our discussions, if we realize that the money isn't there for that, having that priority list matters because then we can say, actually, the money we have is only going to get us through 8. So what are we going to do then to make that work? So I hear from Clint a priority order list. I like that because that gives us the ability then to see what our money is, match it to the priority list and see where we're falling. And are we keeping up? Are we not? You know, with what they think has to happen to keep our assets in good shape. And if we're not, then we address that. But I think the priority list is great. So I think, Leo, that's actually going to help with what you're looking for. So that's what I wanted to say.
And we may have a couple models, like, you know, here's the priority list.
Right.
We couldn't fit them all, so we put a puzzle together in Model A. We took other pieces to make a Model B, you know, to kind of give you like, you know, where we're seeing, like, are we going to prioritize roads or sewers or a little bit of both? You know, so we got to work through this because it is hard. Sometimes when you're looking at it, you know, which is more important, the sewer line or the fire truck?
What I like about
the fine line, you know.
What I like about the priority list too is that, you know, Leo, that gives us the ability on a year when state money goes up to say, this is a year we should be getting further down our priority list because we're getting extra dollars from the state. And on a year when it goes down, right, then we're like, okay, we're not going to get through as many this year. And it holds us accountable then what we're doing with that money, I think. So anyway, I think it fits your model of how I do things at home. I have a priority list. And when money's good, I try to get through more of the list. And when money's not, then it's tight and I get through less of the list that year, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that maybe I wasn't hearing correctly.
Well, I think we're learning, and then this is what we're trying to adapt. But I mean, does the calendar work from? And I know we're over, so Jacob, I'm going to stop.
Can you scroll back up to the top for a second? I just made a really, really important edit.
Happy birthday, Leo.
What a cheap friggin' ploy to say, get someone to say happy birthday to you, huh?
Do we need to sing, Leo?
No, I am not allowing that.
I saw Dan. I told him I wear a tiara if he brought it, but we canceled it. So
yeah. Real quick, Clint, where so can you confirm where we as a council have a chance to opine? Because one of my biggest surprises last year was that it didn't seem like council had a lot of involvement. I just kept waiting to be asked for, you know, my opinion about where we should spend, where we shouldn't spend, etc. And that just never really happened. So you said you built that into this. So where do we as a council get to actually provide opinions on the budget?
First one's January 13th. I prefer priorities, but if you have some, you know, and again, a priority may be, you know, I'm
Yeah,
it's
no, the
bigger, and I'd
priorities,
like to see
opinions,
more.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, but there's where would be the first one. Again, the
Okay.
listening session with the community, I think that's a great, I don't want to lead that. I'm a listener at that night. I think that's something that one of the counselors, and we're gonna have to talk about this, who and how we lead that conversation at that potluck. The next one is, where is it? On the 31st, when we would do the capital presentation.
Yep.
But that's not where I would say there would be some council involvement. I think it's more at the 14th where you would weigh in on the capital plan that we're adopting and what we're doing.
Yeah, okay,
So
yep,
those are two good windows. And
okay.
then I thought the staff would present, the second big picture is April 28th. This is a budget priority, second discussion during a regular council meeting, but it's the big picture budget. We'll have more information to you. You'll have had 2 weeks to review it. What are you looking for? And then 1 week later, we're going to start bringing in staff presentations for the next 3 weeks. And when the staff's done, this is where council, I think, is going to clarify and question, but I don't think this is where you set a new budget priority. You could just look at the entirety, and then when we come back on June 2nd, all you.
Okay,
This
perfect.
is
No,
all
this is,
council time. June is your month.
yes, all right. Nope, perfect. I
June,
like that.
June's
Just
too
keep
late
me
to
on
be.
schedule so that we can get through everything till June. And then once we hit June, you're gonna have documents that have been in front of you. You'll have probably, maybe we should even write that at the June 2nd meeting, if a revision's needed, this is where a second revised budget would be prepared.
What, that's that's super late though. Right? We've done that in the past. We've kind of sat on our hands until June and then started talking. And that's not a good way, I don't think.
I've got
But it
3
sounds like there's
meetings before
hard-
June where you give me your priorities.
Yeah,
Yeah, the January
Please.
one, right.
built in for us to
Yeah.
discuss our priorities before it even gets to the end of the budget, is
Yeah.
what I heard.
Yeah, 3 before it gets to a budget in your hands. I want to hear what you want before we get there. And we could even carve that out a little bit better, maybe in part of one of these capital meetings, what did I have that? We got the capital improvement plan. We could actually intro March 31st. I don't know. I'd like to have the capital plan left alone. I mean, we can do one more.
Right
I
now-
think me personally, I think what you built in is good.
So we've got, I wrote down the dates you said, and it looks like there's input on January 13th, but then
Yeah.
there wasn't really any other place for council input really until April 14th. So that's like quite a few months in between. So is there, I guess that's my only question. Is there time somewhere between January 13th and April 14th? That seems like a 3-month window. It's kind of long, but maybe that's just because there's
Well,
not
the
much
big
getting.
picture budget is the 13th.
So really until the 13th, we haven't even seen a big picture budget as a council.
So you
Okay.
could do, the capital improvement plan hits the 31st. We could do one that night, second discussion of priorities, and then do capital.
I'm good however you see it. I just was wondering if I'd missed one.
Yeah, I like the building in time prior to the budget being developed, so that.
Yeah,
this is only
so
my
that-
second budget process, so I'm honestly still learning this as
So the
well.
3rd would be April 28th, so you'd have 3. So we're now January 13th, March 31st, and April 28th. And again, just discussion. I mean, this
Yeah.
would not be a 2-hour council workshop. We're talking
Yeah.
20 minutes to a half an hour of facilitated conversation by the chair with the council of what you're looking for, maybe a summary sheet, kind of a priorities page that we just keep as a running list. So that whatever you throw out, we'll try to adapt to.
Oh, Clint, we can turn anything into a 2-hour discussion. You know that.
No. Okay, got it. So Leo, there's 3 windows for that then. January 13th, March 31st, and then April 28th, and then all of June. Okay. And Clint, I'm hearing you saying also though that you're open to the fact that there might be a significant budget rewrite happening starting June 2nd, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of what I think. When we're done and we've handed it all to you, you set your priorities. I guess the thing is if we thread the needle and we do it and it meets the priorities you gave us, you still have every right to change it again. Just have that discussion and tell us what you want changed.
Yeah.
You know, that's, you know, I'm trying to get us so that we're not writing the budget as we review it. Let's figure out what we want to write, then go
Mhm.
write it, and then review it. And see if it's what we talked about. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And it's gonna be tricky, but it's first time
Oh.
through. I'm confident this will work.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I like it.
So
Perfect.
I like the tweaks. So we got that saved. Perfect.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Perfect. Thank you all. Have a great Christmas, New Year's holiday season, and we will see you in January. Leo, happy